The President of the United States has said that Assad must go, and that is the policy of the United States. But we do not believe that this military action the President has decided to take should be more than an effort to try to deter and prevent the use of chemical weapons and to degrade his capacity to use those weapons. So the military operation is not calculated to become involved in the effort to topple him, but the political operation and the support for the opposition is. And the President of the United States, as you know, has declared that we will provide additional support to the opposition.
Now, that was Secretary of State John Kerry this past weekend on Meet the Press. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. I'm Alan West, sitting in for the Steve Malzberg, who is enjoying his Rosh Hashanah, Lashana Tikkutevu, to all of the Jewish people out there in America and also in Israel, our dear friends. But joining us now is the one and only, the great one, Judge Andrew Napolitano. And I have to tell you, the last time the judge and I were speaking, he was the one interviewing me, and it was 2006, and I was sitting in Kandahar, Afghanistan. So, Judge, it's great to hear from you, and it's great to be, here in New York City chatting with you.
Colonel, Congressman, it's a pleasure and an honor to be on with you and to be your colleague at the Fox News Channel and to have you out in the world influencing the way people think, because you speak from a unique perspective that some of us can only dream about, the dangers that you have faced in order to preserve human freedom. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, thank you, and that's very humbling. And talking about dangers and human freedom, let's talk about, from a legal perspective, from a constitutionality perspective. The president did not seek any type of congressional approval when he went into Libya. And even, with the War Powers Act that says you have those 90 days, he went beyond the 90 days. So now all of a sudden we have a president that is, stopped in midstream and says, I need the congressional approval, although I still retain the authority to do this. Is this a little bit of a doublespeak? And how can you help us understand the constitutional authority that the president really does have?
It's very complicated, Congressman, and the president's request for congressional authority has legal and constitutional implications. We'll talk about the legal implications, and some of this you know better than I, but we're having the conversation because the public needs to know. There are very limited circumstances under which a country can use its military forces against another country. Obviously, to repel an attack. Obviously, to stop an attack before it starts. Beyond that, it gets a little dicey. You can come to the aid of a country if that country is your ally and it's been attacked. You can use your military forces to enter a country to enforce an international law or an international norm with the express consent of the United Nations. None of those situations applies here. We are not threatened by Syria. They are not an imminent national security threat to us. They have not been invaded to the point where we want to protect them, and the United States has not authorized us to enter. So from the get-go, entering Syria with military force is a violation of international law. Does that bother this president? Probably not. Does it bother most presidents? Probably not. Now we go to American domestic law. The Constitution says only Congress can declare war and the president can wage war. President under the Constitution can't start a war that's not been declared, and the Congress under the Constitution can't tell the president how to fight a war. In 1973, after President Nixon invaded Cambodia, Congress tried to rein him in by enacting the War Powers Act. He vetoed it, and they passed it over his objection. It, as you just described, lets any president fight any war against any foe without express approval by the Congress for up to 90 days. Nixon vetoed it because he thought it restrained him. I think it's unconstitutional because it is the Congress giving away to the president something the Constitution gave to the Congress. So it is lawful for the president to use the military in Syria without express approval by the Congress, but the law that authorizes it is unconstitutional.
Now, the interesting thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, with the War Powers Act is that, once again, it has to be a national security interest. And once again, it has to be some, threat to the United States of America or loss of life of American citizens.
It has to be a certification by the president that it is a threat to national security. You and I know nothing with a capital N that happens in Syria could possibly threaten the national security of the United States. But listening to your former colleagues John McCain and Lindsey Graham, the president has been ginned up into this attitude that, we got to get involved. Yeah. We got to get involved. Something might happen. We got to get involved right now. Now, after 100,000 people are dead, he wants to get involved because he made an ill-advised statement in the heat of the campaign against Mitt Romney a year ago. There's no national security implications here, yet the president has complied with the War Powers Act by certifying that there is.
It's interesting. When I was up there in Congress, I had a person advise me. They worked with the Congressional Research Services. They said up here on Capitol Hill there are three things. There's politics, there's policy, and there's procedure. Do you think, as we look at this venture, which I believe is seriously an ill-conceived venture going into Syria, and I would be voting no, do you see this more as politics than good policy then?
Yes, I do see it as politics. Here's the interesting political issue, Congressman. Here's what I think is going to happen. I think the Senate is going to pass some form of a resolution, and I think the House is going to defeat it. What will the president do? Will he go into Syria anyway? He has the legal authority to do it, but it will be a political disaster for him. 63% of the American public say no. If one House of Congress says no, and he goes in anyway because he technically has the legal authority from this 1973 statute, I think his 38% approval rating will be down around the Nixon range, around 28%.
Yeah, and really, Judge, when you think about it, if the House of Representatives says no, that's the people's house. That's the direct representatives, the direct voice of the American people. If they say no there, then you're going against the will of the American people. And you're right, politically, it is just absolutely a horrible decision if you continue on. But do you think the president has really painted himself in a horrible box, with the statement that he made a year ago, which, according to a lot of intelligence sources, this is not the first time chemical weapons have been used. And now he's saying, kind of out of both sides of his mouth, when you look at what it was said last Saturday, that, I'm going to Congress for approval, but I'm still going to, reserve the right and the authority to go do it anyway. And then, of course, he went to play golf. So is he really in a bad box here?
Yes, and it's a box of his own making. As I said, the statement about the red line, which he's trying to distance himself from.
Oh, he's guilt-tripping the American people.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Was made in the heat of the campaign against Mitt Romney. He wanted to sound more macho than Romney was, which he didn't need to do, but he did it anyway. And then somebody called his bluff. Look, I don't know if they used chemical weapons. I don't know if it was the rebels and Al-Qaeda who used chemical weapons. I do believe that there are people in the American government who are sincere in their belief that chemical weapons were used. And obviously, these are the most horrific weapons on the planet. But what's the difference between killing 1,000 people with a chemical and killing 1,000 people with a machine gun?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
When do we stop becoming the world's policeman? Are we going to invade North Korea because he has starved, the dictator has starved to death thousands of people simply by denying them food? Where will this and when will this and how will this stop?
Yeah, it's an incredible precedent that we established, but then when you look at people such as Susan Rice, when you look at people such as Samantha Power, this is really where they think military power should be used in these, cherry-pick humanitarian cases. Because if you look at Nigeria and this terrorist group called Boko Haram that is absolutely slaughtering Christians and destroying churches, look at what is happening in Egypt. There is no outcry for that. There was no outcry to go into Sudan and do something about the Sudanese and what they were doing to southern Sudan and the Christians there. So I'm very concerned, as you said, when you look at what we have done to our military through sequestration and eroding our capability, that now we're going to try to make us the humanitarian 911 force all over the country, all over the world.
Congressman, I know it's your show and I know we're just about to hit the top of the hour, but why do you think the president is doing this? Why does he want to invade Syria?
Yeah, I for the life of me, I cannot understand, but this is what I do see. This is the trend that I see. President Obama is destabilizing more countries in the Middle East than ever before. He went into Libya without congressional approval, and look what we have in Libya. As a matter of fact, you have terrorists being trained, Islamist terrorists being trained in Libya to go to Syria. Of course, we know here we're coming up on the year anniversary of the 4 Americans that we lost in Benghazi. He embraced the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt by saying that Hosni Mubarak must step down, and look at the situation there and look at the Islamic terrorism that is on the increase in the Sinai Peninsula. This past weekend, we had a cargo ship that was attacked in the Suez Canal. So I don't think that the president has a long-term strategic vision when it comes to understanding the Middle East. As a matter of fact, he said he would pivot away from the Middle East. Now, I don't want to think that the president is trying to set up Islamists to take over in the Middle East. But if you get involved there in Syria to degrade the capability of Assad but upgrade the capability of the opposition, you know, there was an incredible picture on the front of the New York Times today showing the true face of the opposition when they executed 7 soldiers of the Syrian army. That's not who I want to see put into power in that country. So, again, I think that this is bad politics, horrible policy. I think the president has drawn himself in a box. If he had just left a residual force in Iraq, I don't think that you would have the situation in Syria today. Judge, your final thoughts. Where do you think this goes?
I think that the House of Representatives will defeat this resolution, and the president will be persuaded by John Kerry and some of the bloodthirsty people around him to invade Syria, and it will materially and substantially destabilize the region and will bring him and us headaches, the likes of which we will have great difficulty tolerating. I fear for our future.
Yeah.
I fear for our freedom first and our safety second, and I don't trust the instincts of this president.
Well, I got to tell you, Judge, I have said this before and I'll say it again, elections do have consequences.
Yes, they do.
Well,
Congressman, it's a pleasure. Anytime.
Oh,
man.
absolutely. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Judge Andrew Napolitano, a dear friend, a constitutional expert, and I tell you what, a true fighter for freedom and liberty here in the United States of America. Judge, thanks so much, and take care. Have a great weekend.
Thanks for having me. All the best.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be coming up next. We're going to talk a little bit lighter because we've laid a lot of heavy things on you. We're going to talk a little bit about football because the NFL kicks off this tonight with the Baltimore Ravens and the Denver Broncos. And also, we still have some really big college football games coming up this weekend. And please do call in. The lines are open, toll free, 1-855-777-9660. This is Alan West for the Steve Malzberg Show. Coming back to you in a few.